This is Vicki Joe, and I'm here with Dario Nardi. And Dario and I have been doing a series of interviews about his work with personality type and neuroscience. Yeah. So I want to go kind of to the next step in what we've been talking about. I think we've been discussing the brain quite a bit. So something that you've mentioned is, I think the term was whole brain pattern. So what on earth is a whole brain pattern?
Okay. Thank you for having me again. Great to be here. Absolutely. And for folks who are maybe just joining us or want some clarity, when I talk about the brain in particular, I'm talking about the neocortex, the outer layer of the brain. Not to neglect the other regions, but that's the part I can actually get some measurements on for what I'm doing. So the equipment like what we have here, like this nice little neurocap, allows us to assess the voltage and other patterns of activity in individual regions. Yes. And so we plug it in right here. Now, it doesn't work that way.
I knew it!
You knew it. Yes. And so we can get what are called microstates, which are those individual readings from areas. But also what's really interesting are the macrostates. In other words, the pattern as a whole. So for example, we might pick up that this region is predominantly theta, and this region over here is predominantly alpha. Or we might, and so on, that different regions at different levels of activity and wavelengths.
And that's different for every person?
At every moment, yes, at every moment. But there are times when all of the regions either get in sync in some way, so like the whole brain is dominated by theta, or there are some other really interesting patterns that are sustained over 3 seconds, 3 minutes, or even 10 minutes worth of time, depending on what the person is doing. And really can have some profoundly different meanings. I mean, they tell us a lot.
So give me an example of that.
Okay. One of the patterns that's really exciting to see, and I have to be honest, it occurs more, it seems like, in the college age students, who looks at the 18 to 25, than it does in midlife and older. And this is a state that is sometimes called this flow or solid blue or something like that.
Now, flow, that's a big word. What's his name? Mihai Csikszentmihalyi wrote that book about flow. Is it related to that?
It could be. And the reason I say could be is I've been looking at when is it that the whole neocortex is dominated by delta waves. And delta waves, but it sort of normally delta is associated with sleep or sort of a drowsiness. It's not like that. The person is awake, but it's also very, very high amplitude. Like every region is active. It's like going to the beach and you see lots of big, slowly moving waves, but big waves. And so the ocean is active, but it's calm. The same thing, the person is active, but they're calm. When do I see these? Well, it really depends a lot on the person's personality profile, a lot of times.
Well, in what you're saying, it makes me think of meditation. When I think about flow and what we talk about in the field of coaching and all of that. So is it about meditation? Or?
Well, the trick of most meditation techniques, and with everybody who comes in, we do 3 different meditation techniques at the beginning. That actually the whole point is to actually turn off the brain, in a sense. This is like a whole step above that.
Interesting.
The person is fully engaged. The waves are at maximum amplitude, but the person is calm. And when it shows up, for example, we had, in terms of creative expertise, because that's about half the time, person comes in and he's going to play guitar. He plays a song that he knows, and he's singing that. And the parts of the brain that show up with hand movement and with auditory, those get active in the brain. No surprise. And then he turns to doing his own song. And this might even be improvisational in nature. And he starts to play. And the moment he starts to play, the entire neocortex is this solid flow blue state. And it stayed there for 3 solid minutes until basically he was almost done with the song, and then it started to break up a little bit. And I truly mean like unbroken. So these opportunities where the person is being creative, they're improvising a little bit, but they're also bringing in a lot of this this expertise that they need. And that's sort of like half the picture. The other half is when the person is doing something that really seems strongly linked to personality. So for example, there's a subgroup of people that will show that solid blue when listening to others, no matter who it is. They sit and they listen. So consider, like you and I are talking. Now, if we were to pick a really contentious topic, what would happen is with most people, they hear the other person's point of view. They suddenly realize, oh, this is not fitting with mine. And their brain begins to formulate a counter response, a yes, but kind of answer, or no, but. But there are some folks who legitimately, I've seen it for up to 10 minutes, in very contentious topics, maintain a sense of all regions of the brain, I'm fully engaged, maximum amplitude, but at this frequency that's relaxed, that I'm just taking everything in, I'm considering what you're saying, I'm listening in a very active whole brain way. Now, that's sort of extreme. I wouldn't say...
Well, I'm loving hearing that, because as you're describing it, I'm thinking this is what they aimed us for during coach training, to get the different listening and to really be able to be with it. Or if you go to a therapist, that's what you want. You want the person who can really listen. So that's a state of flow.
Absolutely.
For some people.
For some people, yes.
Wow.
And to just even when they're 18 or 20 years old, that's a skill that they have.
Amazing.
Now, there are gradations of that. So I had one student who would show that flow state when listening, but only to girls, not to boys.
Oh.
And this actually made so much sense to him in retrospect when we debriefed the lab, because he said, he's part of a fraternity, and he said, all my fraternity mates tell me I don't listen. He said, you don't listen. He said, but I don't understand. I have all these female friends. He says, I can't keep away having girlfriends. It's and they all tell me, you're a wonderful listener. For a guy, you're a fantastic listener. And it's now we understand. Because he goes into the state of flow when listening to women, or young women. Huh. We didn't try the whole range of ages that are there. Although I have more to say about that, as it turns out. And then I had one student who would only show that state when listening to me, and nobody else.
Oh, interesting.
And as we debriefed afterward, a lot of it fit with my experience with my grandmother. Now, my grandmother, if you can imagine, a Sicilian who's a very traditional Catholic. So that means sex is bad, violence is bad, television is bad. There's this very... and so how would I, explain myself to her? She's not going to take me seriously because, I'm 50 years younger than she is. And what do I know? But I knew, finally, that there was somebody in the world she listened to, and that was the Pope. And so if I began a sentence that says, the Pope says...
Oh, you're sneaky!
Yes, that's right. So that, I don't know because, I never had a chance to test my grandmother. But it really was that, when are we really listening kind of thing. Now, take this listening mode and expand it to when reviewing the past, when visualizing the future, when engaging in a stand-up role play that involves a surprise from the actors who've been hired to facilitate the role play. That it varies a lot, it seems, by personality. And that's just this one state, this example of flow, and there are many others.
Well, now you've got me wondering, because you're talking about this steady blue state of flow. So what's the opposite of that, where there's a whole lot of...
Oh, yeah.
What is that?
So that's a different kind of flow. It's one of my students coined it the Christmas tree.
The Christmas tree.
So you can imagine at Christmas time, you've got all those lights going on, flashing on and off in different colors. Some of the lights don't work. They're sort of uncoordinated. But that has its own benefits. It really does. Because as information comes into the brain, instead of addressing it one way, say if I show you, I'm going to ask you, sort of, what is this?
It is a green washable marker.
Absolutely. So you engaged in some defining, you did some perceptual stuff,
right.
You did some speaking along with that. So probably 3 or 4 regions of the brain were particularly recruited in order to do this. Now, this kind of person, though, who's going to show the sort of very high amplitude Christmas tree kind of pattern, sort of like one of those houses that's over-decorated for Christmas, you give them some things, and here we're going to actually show some examples. And I'm gonna put up 3 here, so all of you can see. By the way, this is a pen inside of this little plush jacket here.
Pouch thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And here we have a crayon, by the way. Okay. And then here we have yet another pen. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, you see these here?
Yep.
Yeah. So which one do you prefer to date?
To date?
Yeah.
That's great. I actually love it. This one.
Okay, why is that?
Because it's just so different and unique and interesting.
This one here, is not only you got to take it out of its jacket. So would you say this is more of an introverted or extroverted person?
Oh dear. Now we're getting into fun metaphor stuff.
Exactly.
It would represent more introverted. That wasn't in my mind when I picked it, but as I've kind of leaned into it, I immediately saw that I was picking somebody who was hidden and was in something inside, something dark and velvety. Yeah.
And if you were, as you are, you're a coach, and you're dealing with somebody, what does this sort of indicate here, metaphorically speaking? They've got like this, if you can see this, they have like a little
guard.
A little guard on top of it, yes. Yeah.
It's a little iron protection for a very sensitive tip. So it might be somebody who's kind of, I don't know, got a kind of a polished exterior persona, and inside there's something very soft and creative, actually.
Do you think maybe something happened during their childhood? Because this isn't really built in as part of the panel.
Yeah, it's been put on, exactly.
Yeah,
it's detachable. Yeah, it's so I'm going to go with this. Pull the
That's right.
Pull the right
that's
cord.
Yes.
Yes, it's a very creative persona that they've developed that they have to put on in order to protect themselves, because they were probably picked on when they were a child for being different.
Yeah, it could be that. Okay. Now let's say this person is going through. Is it a him or a her?
Well, it's a him because I'm dating him.
Okay. Then that makes okay.
I'm a hetero.
Yeah. So okay. So now, this person has several choices in life, and if first of all, which one of these four would be you? Maybe at least you for the purpose of the day.
Oh, gee whiz.
Just for the purpose of the day.
I'm going to go with this one.
Okay, so this one here. Okay, and what kind of date is this going to be? Where are they going to go?
Well, what I've noticed is right away that there's, and what appealed to me about both of them, quite honestly, is the design. Like there's a real sensibility toward design, where these seem a lot more primitive, crayon, they're children's toys. This has some kind of like I can imagine, what is that magazine, Architecture Today, something like that, or Dwell, so there's a sensibility of design and appearance. So they would go to those house things where the designers all come in and each one of them like redecorates the room, and so you just walk through, kind of like IKEA, you just walk through and you're like, oh, that looks so cool. Yeah, so that would be the date.
So what, have we discovered a principle then about adulthood compared to, say, childhood? Do adults have some kind of qualities that they develop that are different from child qualities?
Sure.
Yeah.
You want me to name them?
Sure, why not? Let's just go with one.
Oh, Lord, I don't know. Wow. More acceptance of oddity and an appreciation for it.
And more sophistication as well.
That's a great word.
The design, that's what I keyed on to, is that word. Absolutely. So for those of you who are watching, you may have thought that we're tremendously off task about the brain. But for me, this is a great example of teaching these kinds of Christmas tree brainstorming skills. How many different regions of your brain maybe did you tap during this exercise?
A lot.
Right? We even saw your eyes went in one direction. In some places, you're thinking like this. You're engaged in perceiving, defining, metaphor, feeling also, stepping into the pen, and if this were me. Right, so there's a tremendous amount going on with this, and it may seem at times that we were off task, but in fact, what this exercise allowed us, through exploring and brainstorming, to arrive at some principles that maybe we hadn't thought about before between children and adults, and it gives us some ideas. So it's not the same as that solid blue flow that's there. At least I don't think it in this particular case. We don't have the cap on you right now. But this is the kind of thing that I would say, flow is not just a phenomena in the brain. There's these different holistic patterns. There are several of them. And we can encourage them and teach them and help people engage in these processes. And I think you were pretty comfortable with this one. If we were to give you this tennis ball instead.
Oh, no.
Right? Yes. Right.
Yeah.
But this I know in workshops because I pick out the folks, I'm like, okay, who's comfortable with catching a ball? And just watching the expressions on their faces, they're so comfortable with it. You just throw them back, and now I'm like, okay, now throw it to me. And they see this brief period where I'm like, oh my God, is it going to hit me in the face? I mean, I catch it, but there's not the same relaxation. I'm not in the state of flow that the person who loves this. And of course, we evolved to not only do physical stuff in the world, but also to think abstractly and to think about social stuff.
Now, as you compare those, I'm wondering, like, are there some states that are healthy versus unhealthy? I mean, would you define them that way, describe them that way?
I do believe that there are some states which, how can we say, we can develop habits which are no longer adapted in a satisfying way to our environment. There are also habits we can develop that are simply no longer sustainable. I think we watch those on cable sometimes, like with hoarders. Okay, there's past a certain point, the house is no longer, the habit's no longer sustainable.
Good,
yeah.
yeah.
So I'm not going to say, oh, everything is equal and it's just different, but the question is, how adapted is it? And if we can find ways then to intervene in the brain to understand what are these states that we find ourselves in, these macro states, then maybe we can also help each other shift at some time or get out of those.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dario. This has been really interesting, and now I know what kind of men I'm attracted to. So we've solved that problem, that burning issue. So thanks very much.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's
It was
do
a
it
delight.
again.
Yes.
Great.
See you next month.
Great.